It's strange to realize the exact moment when the world turns its back on you. There's no official announcement, no door that slams shut. It's more like an icy silence that slowly spreads across the walls of the place where you are. The once warm voices become distant murmurs. The eyes that admired you now look away. And all that's left is you in front of the mirror, trying to understand where everything started to fall apart. But it's not just me. I've seen it happen to others. Good men, men of faith, men whose hearts were ablaze with a flame that could not be extinguished by empty words or new rules imposed by those who had forgotten the essence. They were silenced, intimidated, sent away, some institutionalized, as if the truth they carried was a disorder. But what was disturbing was not their madness, it was their lucidity. It was their courage to still look to the sky and say, yes, when the whole world was shouting, shut up. I remember the moment I decided to dive into this madness. Too, it wasn't something that happened all of a sudden. It was like a pulled thread, a nagging feeling in my soul, a question that wouldn't go away. What is suffering? What does it mean to give oneself to the end? What is behind the cross, beyond the wood, beyond the blood, beyond the mockery? Many people treat suffering as something to be avoided, but there is a mystery there. There is a depth to suffering that reveals truths that the surface would never allow us to see. It is not about seeking pain out of vanity, but about understanding that certain truths are only revealed through it. And it was at that point that I understood. If I really wanted to talk about faith, about salvation, about redemption, I would have to enter this abyss with my eyes open. Making that film was more than an artistic project. It was a war against mediocrity, against fake smiles, against cynicism disguised as tolerance. I didn't want a light, pretty, empty narrative. I wanted to show the torn flesh, the naked soul, the horror and beauty intertwined. I wanted to show what it means to give yourself up for love. For real, not just for lip service. Of course, this would generate resistance, but I underestimated the level of the reaction. I was called a fanatic, an anti-Semite, an obsessive. They said I was out of my mind. And maybe, in part, they were right. But it was a lucid madness, a dive so deep into the mystery of faith that few people can follow it without being frightened. Because when you get too close to the sacred, you either bow down or run away. As I struggled to make the film happen, I realized it wasn't just about production or budget. It was about confronting entire structures that thrive on keeping everything shallow. Entire studios refused to support. Distributors turned their backs. Friends walked away. Even within the church, the looks of disapproval were more intense than I expected. Even bishops, men who were supposed to be guardians of the faith, treated me like an outcast. Some didn't even have the decency to feign support. And there I was, between scripts and visions, trying to put together a puzzle that I didn't even know where it would lead. There were days when everything seemed to make sense, when the pieces fit together with divine clarity. But there were nights, long nights, when everything was confusion. When I wondered if I was doing the right thing, if I was really called to do that, or if I was just raving in the midst of vanity. I remember one time I went into a room and took a friend to an audition. I wasn't even supposed to be there, but someone looked at me and thought there was something strange in my eyes. They took some Polaroids and told me to come back in 3 weeks. When I came back, no one remembered me. "Who are you?" they asked. And I pointed to the wall and said, "I'm the guy in that photo." I ended up getting a role. Life is like that. Sometimes you walk through a door you didn't even know existed, and that changes everything. But that experience was just a premonition, because with the passion, it wasn't just a door. It was a storm. It was the sky opening up to show what's behind the curtain. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The visions began to come more frequently. They weren't dreams. They were vivid images, whippings, nails, the weight of the cross, abandonment. I tried to push them away, but they kept coming back. It was as if a part of me was already there, on that path, walking with him, feeling every blow. And when you experience that, even just a little, you change. And that's when I knew either I made this movie the way it needed to be made, or I didn't make it at all. There was no middle ground. And then came the resistance, the rejections, the closed doors, the attacks. I was accused of everything you can imagine. Some newspapers went so far as to call me dangerous, a heretic, an unstable person. I asked myself, where were these voices when the studios were promoting empty violence, cheap sensuality, emotional pornography disguised as art? Why the scandal now? But I knew the answer. It was because I was dealing with something that bothers, with the suffering that saves, with the blood that redeems, with the silence that reveals. And that is dangerous for a world that prefers noise, distraction, superficiality. Ultimately, it wasn't just a movie. It was a spark trying to light a fire in a world covered in ashes. There were times during filming when I seriously considered giving up. Not because I lacked faith, but because the weight of what we were dealing with was too great. It was as if with every scene, every rehearsal, every take, we were tearing away the veil on something very sacred and also very dangerous. We weren't just reenacting an ancient story. We were touching raw wounds, pains that had yet to be understood. We were messing with forces that were invisible, both inside and outside of us. I could see it in the eyes of the cast, especially him, the actor who played Christ. There were days when he seemed to no longer be himself. His gaze became distant, dense, almost unreal. He was no longer just acting. He was feeling the cross on his shoulders, the cold of the early morning, the blood in his eyes, and it consumed him. At one point I had to take him away for a while. He was weak, sick, with physical pain that seemed inexplicable. He even got struck by lightning twice, and he survived. No one could understand that, but I understood. It was as if the sky itself was testing us, asking us if we were really willing to go all the way. And the truth is, few were. Some of the crew walked out on the project. Others freaked out. There was a day when I almost didn't go to the set myself. I looked in the mirror, and I saw in my face not a director, but a man about to break. And that's when I understood this was also part of the journey. It was the purification before surrender. I knew I wouldn't be understood, and in a way I accepted that. Because deep down, my intention was never to please. It was to obey. It was to be faithful to that which was entrusted to me. It was as if a voice was saying all the time, don't dilute it, don't soften it, show it as it was, as it is, as it continues to be. But then something began to happen that no one expected. People began to go to the movies in silence. They cried, they left in shock. Some prayed, others hugged strangers. It wasn't entertainment, it was almost a ritual, a confrontation with the most hidden reality of faith. And this, no matter how much many tried to stifle it, could not be ignored. The film became news all over the world, and with me, it took its toll, not only in public attacks, but also in my heart. I started having nightmares, nameless anguish, old fears returned. There were days when I could barely get out of bed. It was as if hell had marked me, and maybe it had. But I knew it was part of the path, and strangely, there was peace in that. Because in the end, what matters is not what they say about you. It is what remains when everything around you falls apart. And what remained was his silence. The same silence of the cross, a silence that screams louder than any accusation. Time passed, the dust settled, the film continued on its way, but inside me, something had changed forever. There was no going back. I had already seen what many spend their entire lives avoiding seeing. And the most painful thing, I realized that many within the faith itself did not want to see it either. They preferred a comfortable, palatable religion, shaped so as not to disturb. A faith without blood, without sacrifice, without a cross. But that is not faith. It is distraction dressed in sacred clothing. So I walked away, not out of pride, but out of survival. I continued my path in the shadows, watching, listening, waiting, because I knew the time to speak again would come, because when you truly touch the sacred, it leaves its mark on you, not as a memory, but as an open wound that pulses, that breathes, that calls you back. And this call never left me. Even in the moments when I tried to turn away, to pursue other projects, to live normally, the call came back. And it came back with more strength, with more pain, with more urgency. I asked myself, why? Why me? Why did this story choose me? Why was this cross placed on my shoulders? The answer, little by little, came in the silence. It wasn't about me. It never was. I was just in the right place to listen, to be bothered, to give in, and it was that yes that opened the crack. A crack that showed me that there is an invisible theater behind what we call reality, a theater where forces constantly act, shaping events, inspiring or destroying, depending on who listens and who remains silent. And the hardest thing to accept. Many of those who claim to represent the light are in fact hiding the darkness. I saw this up close. I saw meetings with smiling, well-dressed people with religious titles and speeches about love, while they plotted boycotts, threats, lies. I saw men who talk about God conspiring like serpents. And I understood, evil does not hide in alleys. It disguises itself as good. And that's why telling the truth is so uncomfortable, because the truth has no makeup. The truth bleeds, the truth exposes, the truth forces change. But who wants to change? When I released The Passion of the Christ, I expected a reaction. But I didn't expect the amount of resistance, not from outsiders, but from insiders, from those who should be grateful for a raw, honest, and direct representation of the Savior's pain. But many didn't want to see the blood. They didn't want to face the whip, the crown of thorns, the weight of sin. They preferred a pretty Christ, clean, without scars, a Christ for display, decorative, domesticated. But he is not like that. He is real. He screams, he suffers, he cries. He carries the world on his shoulders. He loves to the limit. And that limit was the cross. This is what fascinates me and what scares me, because it is a story that continues. A crucifixion that repeats itself in every injustice, in every betrayal, in every complicit silence. Christ continues to be crucified every day, in the streets, in the churches, in the palaces, in us. And that's when the question comes back sharply, what are you doing with this? Pretending not to see? Trying to turn it into entertainment? Ignoring the call? And I know that many people feel this. In silence, in their soul. An annoyance that doesn't go away, a discomfort that can't be explained. It's the spirit awakening, asking for more, begging for truth, begging for depth. And that's what I cling to the cry of the invisible, to the eyes that still search, to the souls that refuse to be numb, because I know there is an invisible army, simple people, broken people, people tired of lies, people who no longer fit into this world that lives on appearances, people who want to touch the sky, but with their feet dirty with earth, people who understand that faith is not a performance, it is surrender. It's for these people that I continue, even without knowing what comes next, even without guarantees, even with fear, because fear is part of it. It doesn't go away. But it doesn't rule anymore. Today I look back and understand that film was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of everything, the beginning of my downfall, the beginning of my search, the beginning of my mission. And now, more than ever, I feel that we are once again on the brink of the abyss. The world has accelerated, lies have multiplied, truth has become a product, Faith has become a business. Pain has become a spectacle. And in the midst of all this, his silence still speaks, maybe louder than ever. Maybe you're hearing it too. And if it is, don't ignore it. If you've made it this far, subscribe to the channel, like it and comment, "Faith that resists" below, so I know you've made it to the end. This helps a lot and strengthens this message. See you next time.